In sports, I'm Contain Kunas, and we are T-minus 2 weeks away from the NFL draft starting. Yes, there's going to be a bit of adjustments and such going on, but as of this moment, less than 2 weeks until the draft started, let's look back on how the stats were from everyone drafted last year. I'm going to go over basically a lot of the first round, all the first round picks, and then some highlights out of some of the steals from last year. Now let's just get started with number one overall pick, Kyler Murray. 64% completion percentage, 3,700 yards, 20 touchdowns, 12 picks, sacked a lot, and he does have a lot of maneuverability to where, despite everyone's concerns on his height, has shown to be a very solid quarterback, especially during this rookie season. And between getting help between Evan Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, and now DeAndre Hopkins back, as long as they can build up his offensive line and he can kind of fix his ability to kind of force some of his own sacks on himself and keeping a consistent running game between Kenyon Drake, he's going to be a solid towards the upper tier of quarterbacks potentially in the future. We'll see how his sophomore year goes. Then we go into Nick Bosa, who is considered to be probably the best of this coming draft, this past draft. The for sure Pro Bowl, as he did make the Pro Bowl last year. Potential All-Pro guy with his brother Joey Bosa up for the LA Chargers. But Bosa, 16 tackles for loss, 9 sacks, 25 quarterback hits. That's ridiculous, though. I'm not going to deny his talent and for the fact that he is going to be a wrecking crew in the future. But going on number 3, and someone with a bunch of hype coming in also for the New York Jets, Quinnen Williams. Although he really didn't give them that much to hype about from this first season, and also for the fact that he got pulled over for a marijuana charge, which I know they're going to calm down, but he got pulled over. He had police questioning off of him, but still, 28 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, 6 quarterback hits. Not the entirety of what you're hoping for him, but he only started 4 games all last season. Then you go with one who was thought to be definitely a reach, probably the first reach of the draft, being Clelin Ferrell, where a lot of people saw him to be a late first-round pick, but really had a very solid rookie year. Started 15 games, 8 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 8 quarterback hits. Kind of building off of a very strong Raiders, the last season of the Oakland Raiders, but the whole Raiders rookie class really was solid overall. Then going into Devin White for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, after being hurt the first quarter of the season, he had 91 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 5 quarterback hits, and 2 defensive touchdowns with one of his picks, including a pick 6. Now, kind of what you expect off of White. Very strong tackler, very good leader in the middle. There is a few things they can end up building up, like one, staying healthy, and he is one that's a bit over-aggressive at times. And through some of Pro Football Focus, they have shown him to be kind of going onto some of his LSU 2018 film, which is not as good as his high praise that everyone gave him through his junior year, as it seems like every LSU linebacker gets at this point, coming through with a solid rookie season. Then going into the next quarterback on this list, Daniel Jones, the one who really got the ball rolling for the fact that no one really expected this. He was the one where it's like everybody was questioning David Gettleman, the Giants GM, on his decision. And despite having fumbling woes, he did have a league-high 18 fumbles on the year, which is really rough to see. But you kind of have to expect that for a rookie. He only lost 3 of those fumbles. Still, he was sacked 38 times, and a lot of those go into those fumbles. But still, 62% completion percentage, 24 touchdowns, 12 interceptions to finally replace Eli Manning, where they were kind of barren of offensive talent coming into the season outside of Saquon Barkley, especially after they got rid of OBJ. 2 seasons ago. Then going to the 7th overall pick, we got Josh Allen, which a lot of people were expecting he was going to be the first. He was going to be the first pass rusher off the board after Nick Bosa, and he showed you why. Because for the fact that he had 11 tackles for loss, 10.5 tackles, 10.5 sacks, 23 quarterback hits, numbers that are very similar to Bosa's. Just he really didn't get that much of playing time, more for the fact that he only started 4 games. So a lot of people were questioning why he was not used more, because he proved to be productive as he got more and more time on the field. Then we go to the first tight end off the board, TJ Hockenson out of Iowa. Now, people were kind of hoping that he was going to end up jumping off the scene and being a big-time receiving target. Really was only so-so. He only had 32 catches, started about half of the season, 367 yards, 11.5 average, 2 touchdowns. Solid for a rookie year, but not top 10 material. Then going on to Ed Oliver out of Houston. A very solid season for a defensive tackle. 43 tackles in 7 games started, played in all 16 games, 5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 8 quarterback hits, 2 pass deflections, and 1 forced fumble. Very good for a strong team up the middle defensively, being able to fit some of the pass rush to end up kind of replacing Kyle Williams down in the middle, who probably will get his name retired in Buffalo Bill history. Going to finish all the top 10, we have Devin Bush, the second-rated middle linebacker in this class out of Michigan. Started 15 out of 16 games, 109 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions. Very productive and kind of a stat filler on defense at that middle linebacker position. Solid, very strong tackler, and solid against in coverage. So someone that can end up building to replace James Ferrier after he had his big neck injury a few years back. I don't know if he's going to come back or if that's just going to be Bush's position for now on, which could be entirely possible. Then going on to the first that missed the entire season, Jonah Williams, left tackle out of Alabama. He didn't start an entire game. He had shoulder surgery before the season started. Kind of would have helped in kind of protecting Andy Dalton and Ryan Finley, but he's kind of be able to basically restart his rookie year with very likely Joe Burrow as a new starting quarterback, and he'll have a good, strong former first-round pick left tackle to protect him. Then going on to Rashawn Gary out of Michigan, one that was very highly rated coming out of high school, going into college, the number 1 overall prospect, 5-star guy. Really didn't play completely up to his potential until that junior season, and just like his transition from high school to college, he kind of has a slow transition from college to the pros. He played in all 16 games, but didn't start anything. Really didn't have much production, just barely averaging over a tackle per game. But 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 1 fumble recovery, 3 quarterback hits. Not something that they were hoping for Green Bay, but hopefully he can end up adding some production off the edge, get the ball, and get some added hits in the backfield. Then going back into Clemson going into his 2019 draft had 4 first-round defensive linemen. This is the second one with Christian Wilkins. Very solid in the middle for Miami. They had to get a bunch of young people to get consistent amounts of playing time, and he definitely showed that as a D tackle. 56 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, kind of a plug guy in the middle. And from this draft of Miami and this coming draft for 2020, Miami's going to be able to end up building more on defense and offense just to be able to hopefully become more of a factor in the AFC East now since Brady has now gone down south to the NFC. Now we got Chris Lindstrom, another one that has had injury woes during this past season out of Boston College. Only started 5 games. It was week 1 and then the last 4 games of the season. Just like a lot of people for Atlanta, got hurt with a broken foot. And for the time that he was available, he actually was a very solid guy as a left guard. So really didn't give up any sacks on it, and there was really no penalties to really count on this, but it's still kind of a limited sample size for it to go off of. But it could be another one down in the middle that could help. That could help out a Matt Ryan who really took a bit of a beating last year. Then going into the third quarterback of this draft, and the one that everyone was thinking was going to go to New York, Dwayne Haskins, kind of had an up and down season whenever he finally got on the field after you had Case Keenum struggle to start, and then you having Colt McCoy play a little bit. Only started 7 games, nearly 59% completion percentage, 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Not great. Definitely the lowest of all the quarterbacks on this list, and made it to where the Redskins ended up trading with Carolina for Kyle Allen, who got more experience, who had more experience than Haskins, and really definitely performed better than him. But sacked 29 times and potentially still could be the quarterback of the future. We'll see what they end up doing with the number 1 overall pick. Likely to be Chase Young, but you've heard rumblings that they might want to go after like a Justin Herbert or a Tua Tagovailoa. But going up next, we're going to, as I was saying, Carolina. They had Brian Burns, outside linebacker, edge rusher out of Boston College. Started 5 games, 25 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, 16 quarterback hits, where he had a lot. Wherever he played, he did have a lot of production during that time frame, but they really were kind of at a point where they started out very strong, and kind of with him, the rest of the team kind of just plummeted towards the latter part of the season with Kyle Allen, and where most of their offense was Christian McCaffrey, and their defense kind of folded down the stretch. Then you have the third of the Clemson D lineman, Dexter Lawrence, the second defensive tackle, 38 tackles, started every single game. The Giants, as I was saying, they are kind of deformed from a lot of talent on their team. They started to build it on last year with this draft, as with Daniel Jones, now with Dexter Lawrence, and there'll be another one I'll be speaking of later on. 3 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 9 quarterback hits. A lot good production from being in the middle, and he started every single game, so he should end up improving on that for his sophomore season in the NFL. Then we get Garrett Bradbury, the first offensive lineman the first center came off the board, where he started every game, and yes, it's going to end up impacting him for the fact that he had tied for 4th most in penalties, tied for 2nd most among centers with sacks allowed, one of the lowest centers in the league, but it's the rookie season, so Minnesota may try to end up improving off of their center in this draft, but for the fact that they ended up investing a 1st-round pick last year on him, there's really not much further he can go but up. But going on to the 19th overall pick, which is Jeffrey Simmons out of Mississippi State. Started 7 games of his 9 games that he played, 32 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. He had tackle production through his last the half part of the season he did play, but really was just kind of a body in the middle. Didn't really get to be in the consistent part of the rotation, but just on specific downs. So not really too much to say off of him, but he could end up building off of that effort next season, especially for the fact that he gets another edge rusher that could end up helping him in the middle with Vic Beasley. Then going to the second Iowa tight end in last year's draft, both being in the 1st round with Noah Fant, who is actually the more productive one last season. Started 11 games, played in all 16, 40 catches, 562 yards, 14 yards a catch, and 3 touchdowns. A good target for whenever they had Joe Flacco, whenever they had Brandon Allen, and now whenever they have their starting quarterback, probably for the future, between being Drew Lock. Next, we're going back to Green Bay with Darnell Savage, safety, who started 14 games, 55 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 2 interceptions, 5 pass deflected. Kind of a deep safety where a deep strong safety where he'll end up getting a lot of tackles. Not really so much of a deep cover guy, but strong tackler and not really too much to say on him. Then we go back to Philadelphia and Andre Dillard, who really didn't have that much production in Philadelphia his first season. They started him at right tackle for 4 games, where they had Jason Peters at left tackle. They put him at right tackle and gave up a sack, 1 sack per game and 1 penalty. So didn't really show the production at Notre Dame that made people think, is he going to actually be a good outside tackle to, one, guard against the Khalil Macks of the world and amongst others. Then we go into another offensive tackle on the right side, Tytus Howard. Started 8 games, 1 at left guard, 7 at right tackle. Kind of struggled at left guard, so he got hurt in the middle of the season. Started 3 games at right tackle. Had an MCL injury. They put him on injury reserve for short term, but towards the latter part of the season, they put him back. Came back in for another 4 games. 3 more games, and was actually pretty solid, where he came out of Alabama A&M, so he was kind of raw to begin with from going against the SWAC and lower competition in college. So he was going to be a bit of a project towards the latter part of the first round, but a solid guy and could end up being potentially strong in the future for a Deshaun Watson team that needed offensive line production and still could honestly use more. Then we go into the first running back off the board with Alabama's Josh Jacobs, and probably the best running back in this draft, where the only one that went over 1,000 yards rushing with 1150, 4.8 yards per attempt, and 7 touchdowns. As I was saying earlier, Las Vegas Raiders had a very good draft with their rookies, and they have some quality from this draft. Probably the top team in this draft after that one season. But there's more on the way to end up proving that point. Then we go to maybe the biggest surprise on team quality with how good they were with the Baltimore Ravens with Marquise Hollywood Brown. He ended up kind of becoming the deep threat, being the best option for Lamar Jackson in his first full season. Brown started 11 games, 46 receptions, 584 yards, and 7 touchdowns. So he kind of ended up becoming that number 1 target ahead of the Willie Sneads, amongst others. Then we go into Montez Sweat, the second defensive lineman out of Mississippi State. Started all 16 games, very solid off the edge, 8 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 12 quarterback hits. Just one that the Redskins can end up building on, maybe getting Chase Young to fit on the other side of the line. Then we go to 27 with the back to the Oakland Raiders, where this was really the only one that they picked early on that really didn't really have any production, because he got hurt with shoulder surgery. It was a bad first Monday night game of the year. He had 5 tackles and 1 pass deflection in his early going, but in the game against the Broncos, he got hurt bad, and you kind of knew it was going to be bad. So it's a little too early to give him that much of a factor as a cover safety. Then we go to Jeremy Tillery out of Notre Dame, going to the Chargers. Started 3 games, played in 15. A little spacier guy in the middle, but Chargers really didn't utilize him that much, and he didn't become that much of a factor most of the season. Only 17 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 3 quarterback hits. So he gets some pressure up the middle, but hasn't really shown to be one that can impact the running game too much up the middle. Then, speaking of another one, not really making too much of an impact, LJ Collier at TCU. Went to Seattle, played in 11 games, only had 3 tackles as a D end. Not much to say on him. Then we go to the Giants, DeAndre Baker at Georgia, the first cornerback off the board. Is that right? Yeah, this was really kind of a weak cornerback class for the fact that, yeah, Baker was the first one off the board, and he started most of the games of the season with 8 pass deflections. Didn't really show that he could actually pick off a pass, though. Kind of unfortunate for the Giants, but once again, they get a top pick this year. Then we go to Atlanta, to another team with Caleb McGarry, where out of Michigan, they needed offensive line help. He got someone new. It didn't help. On the right side of the line, starting at right tackle, gave up 13 sacks in all games that he started, 6 penalties, the most sacks out of any offensive lineman in the league. It's still going to be a place of need, probably the most likely bust. These last few have been mostly bust, Baker maybe being the only exception. Then to end off the first round, you got N'Keal Harry out of Arizona State going to New England. The Patriots, for a lot of last season, they had very little skill in the skill position for wide receivers for Tom Brady. Only had 12 receptions on the year, 105 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and they used him in a few jet sweeps. But early on the season, he was hurt and didn't come back until mid-year, and really only kind of got a little bit of repertoire with Brady off and on, never really became like a go-to target. That still was kind of Julian Edelman or nothing. Then after that, that's the end of the first round off of it. I do have a few of the exceptions that's not in the first round that had very strong production and were worth mentioning. Starting off with Deebo Samuel at South Carolina. I saw him in college, and he was Mr. Everything for South Carolina, just like Randall Cobb used to be Mr. Everything for Kentucky. But Samuel started 11 games, 57 receptions, 802 yards, really became the top receiver for San Francisco ahead of Emmanuel Sanders. And he's one guy that they can end up kind of moving all the way around where, yes, a lot of his work would be as a slot receiver, but he could work on the outside, and he is one that can be a big threat off of the run after the catch, and is one that they can end up use as a running back in the jet sweeps as well, and a wide receiver reverses. So really became a solid factor through the season and in the playoffs and the Super Bowl. So next up, we've got the first quarterback off the board that wasn't in the first round out of Missouri, Drew Lock. Now, earlier on the season, he was hurt, so they didn't really want to put him in they weren't going to put him in the fray early on. That's why they had Joe Flacco as a bridge quarterback, and until Lock got healthy, they put Brandon Allen out of Arkansas in. A little bit more experience in that end. But in the end, Lock started 5 games, 64% completion percentage, 7 touchdowns, 3 picks. Upper management with John Elway ended up liking him a lot, and for the fact that they didn't bring back Flacco, and he's already gotten ahead of Allen on the pecking order for them. Sacked 5 times in 5 games. Yeah, once again, that's reasonable. 18 rushes for 72 yards, so he's shown to have a bit of mobility wherever need be. Next, we go into probably the top wide receiver in this draft, A.J. Brown out of Ole Miss. Actually, 2 Ole Miss wide receivers could make near that argument, plus Samuel. A lot of wide receivers in the SEC could make the argument. But that being said, 52 receptions, over 1,000 yards receiving, 20 yards a catch, which is insane. Going into the latter part of the season, outside the Saints game, which he was not there, which he was really kind of a very little factor as Derrick Henry didn't play in that game. Outside of that, he was just one that would break off consistently for 40, 50, 60-yard touchdown catches. And really, he wasn't a factor for the most part until the last half of the year and in the playoffs in their surprising run to the AFC Championship game. And yeah, he's become their top guy pretty much by far for Tennessee. It's gonna be interesting to see how he meshes, if he still considers the mesh with a now highly paid Tannehill and a franchise tag Derrick Henry. Next, we go back to the running backs with the second running back off the board, Miles Sanders, the second productive running back off the board. 818 yards in 179 rushes, 4.5 yards a carry, and 3 touchdowns. And coming out of college, out of Washington, actually out of Penn State, he was known to be a very good receiving back. That showed with his 50 receptions. And after getting above Jordan Howard in the depth chart, he was able to end up becoming a solid factor towards the latter part of the season and definitely helped to get the Eagles into playoffs, winning that NFC East. Next, we have Mecole Hardman, another speedster and another deep threat with over 20 yards a carry out of Georgia. Only started 5 games, but 26 receptions, 538 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He did become more of the deep target with Tyreek Hill. And then they still had Travis Kelce, Albert Wilson. The Chiefs were stacked into their Super Bowl run. But Hardman's going to put the Chiefs out of a position where they're going to have to wonder what they want to do with Tyreek Hill, because he could potentially be on the chopping block, because Hardman is bigger than Hill and is younger than Hill, so they can end up making some of the off-the-field issues that Hill has shown. They can make that a bit of a detriment on bringing him back, but Hardman's definitely shown that he could be a prominent factor in their offense. Let's just see how he does in a full season of probably starting a lot of more games. Then we have, going down to Juan Thornhill, back to the Chiefs. Even though they weren't considered to be that great of a defense, he did start in all the games, kind of played safety with the Honey Badger. 58 tackles, 3 receptions, 5 passes deflected, and 1 touchdown. It did help that their defense did get better towards the latter part of the year. Thornhill, as he got more entrenched into that defense, to really being more comfortable in his role as kind of a deep cover guy, it did make it to where he did become more of a factor later on. Then, as I was saying, the second of the Ole Miss receivers with DK Metcalf started 8 of the 16 games he played, 58 receptions, 900 yards, 50.5 yards a catch, and 7 touchdowns. Between him and Tyler Lockett, they became a very strong 1-2 punch where Metcalf's more the power guy, Lockett's more the shifty mid-tier guy that can end up kind of juking people out of place. Metcalf is just ridiculously strong and muscle upon muscles that he showed off in the plenty last year. Next, we go back to the AFC with Deontay Johnson. While the Steelers finally got rid of their whole Antonio Brown issue, which at this point, everyone in the Pittsburgh organization is probably so glad that they finally got rid of him. But Deontay Johnson became a solid number 2 as Juju Smith-Schuster became the number 1 for them. But in starting 12 games, he had 59 receptions, 680 yards, 11.5 yards a catch with 5 touchdowns. Is one that ends up working a lot in the slot, and just someone that can build him off in the future, maybe being a second outside guy, but we'll see off of that. Against the improved Cleveland team, and definitely got to be an improved Cincinnati team, and the strong defense for Baltimore, they need him plus more targets for Big Ben once he gets back. Actually, he probably will get more production once Roethlisberger does return, more than likely next year. Then off to the third running back out of Iowa State. There we go. Devin Singletary for Buffalo, 151 carries in 8 starts, 775 yards, 5 yards a carry, 2 touchdowns rushing and receiving. Once they got once LaShawn McCoy was cut from the team, McCoy went to the Chiefs, became more of a receiving back on there. It became Singletary's job ahead of T.J. Yeldon, and outside of that, really not that much production. But he early on he kind of struggled just because he didn't get much playing time, but towards the latter part of the season and in his one postseason game became more of a factor. And they really could have won that playoff game ahead of the Texans if not for some bonehead plays by the other Josh Allen on their team. Then we go to probably the one offensive bright spot last year for the Washington Redskins in Terry McLaurin out of Ohio State, where wherever Keenan was having a bad year, wherever Haskins was still trying to find himself, wherever McCoy was in there, he was still the top guy receiving the ball last year. And with another year experience with Haskins or potentially having Kyle Allen as a quarterback, he should build off of his 919 yards, 15.8 average, 7 touchdowns. He should be a 1,000-yard receiver if he doesn't become more of a primary target for some teams that may have not given him that light of day for his rookie season. Then we go on to, we're getting towards the end on this, the first Saint on the board here with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, safety out of Florida. Started 7 games, 49 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 8 pass deflections, 4 hits, 1 interception, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble recovery. So the production on him being to be a very strong tackler and being very good in coverage, they kind of be able to the Saints were able to use him as a box safety, put him in a lot of the roles as a nickelback to end up replacing Von Bell, who ended up going to the Bengals in the offseason. They made it to where they didn't actually have to pay him a large contract. They did actually pay Malcolm Jenkins, but in this coming season, he's going to become more of a factor, probably going to start most of his games of the season as potentially a slot guy and potentially kind of a outside linebacker rusher on the side as a safety. But yeah, very productive in his first season and definitely showed the staff that they found a steal in the 3rd round. Actually, in the early 4th round, my bad. Then back to Oakland with Maxx Crosby, 2nd in the NFL for all rookies in sacks with 10 sacks on the season as a 4th round pick. 16 tackles for loss, 14 quarterback hits, 4 forced pass deflections, 4 forced fumbles. This was a surprise of this draft, with Crosby being this far down. And yes, he got a lot of playing time because of they kind of had to gradually recover from the Khalil Mack trade, but you thought it would have been from some of those 1st-round picks that they got. But they actually built up a very solid draft throughout it. Between Jacobs, between Cleveland Farrell, between Maxx Crosby here, Jonathan Abrams a little wait and see, but they have a pass rush that they built up this season. So going into Las Vegas, they have something to build off of on defense. And then we're back with the Raiders with Hunter Renfrow, where everyone knows him for being the guy who caught the touchdown pass from Deshaun Watson in the college football playoff to shock Alabama for the first time and beat them in a shootout. But really, well, one, he's been productive his entire career at Clemson and ended up continuing showing that for the Raiders. As Renfrow really was the number one receiving target, wide receiver target for Derek Carr and the Raiders. As yes, Darren Waller, their tight end, ended up going over 1,000 yards, but Renfrow led the team in receptions. And between him and Tyrell Williams, those were the top 2 wide receivers on the team last year. 605 yards, 12.3 yards per catch, and 4 touchdowns. So the Raiders are very young, and they've bolstered a lot of talent from this draft. 5 guys who have shown capability to be very strong producers going into this next 2020 season, and one that was just injured all last year, so it's kind of a wait and see. Then we have the Giants, who they got a receiving target. He kind of became the main guy for Daniel Jones to go through with Darius Slayton. Whenever he started 9 games, as Jones got in further onto the season, they did go on a bit of a youth movement on offense, but got 48 catches, 740 yards, 15.5 yards per catch, and 8 touchdowns. Still put them in a position to where they're going to be the 4th overall pick in this draft, but they have to build off of some youth at this point. That was kind of to be expected, especially with a brand new quarterback that has room to grow and a lot of a team that is towards the younger part of their career. Then we go to another surprise, Cole Holcomb, out of North Carolina. Another one from Washington on defense, where there's not that much talent on the team, so he was more of a just he didn't really have too much off of kind of aggressive stats where it's like being in the backfield, being good with his ball skills. He's just one that someone gets ball, his era, he tackle. That was basically his role. But if you really think about it, that's not one that'll potentially always lead to a successful career. Yes, he got over 100 tackles, only 6 for loss, 2 hits, 1 sack, 1 pass deflected, 3 forced fumbles. But if you end up going back to someone, Saints fans will remember this, Stephon Anthony, who had over 100 tackles as a starting linebacker his rookie year as a 31st overall pick. And after that year, really did not become much of a factor and is now no longer on the team. But they needed some youth on their side, so. Then on this last one, we go into Minshew Mania. The last of the quarterbacks that really had a very solid career at Washington State and started 12 games, 60.5% completion percentage, 3,200 yards, 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. There was not much to be excited for Jacksonville as Nick Foles got hurt early in the season, and that's when Minshew Mania took over. Because just look at that beard. Ain't it fabulous? Makes me think of a Ron Burgundy type over here. Actually, I know he's dressed up as in one of his press conferences, so go have fun with that if y'all can find it. But yeah, he did well enough to end up for Jacksonville to decide to trade Nick Foles to the Bears. That may also be for a reason because Nick Foles' contract is pretty nuts, and the Bears were able to take on all of that contract. But Jacksonville has a decision to make on this year. They could end up making Minshew their starting quarterback for this season and trying to build off of him, or because they have a draft pick in the top 10, they could try to go after a quarterback, maybe Herbert, maybe Jordan Love that early, or they could trade back if they think Love would still be there later on. But yeah, that is the last of recapping 2019 stats, 2019 rookie stats. A lot of players end up showing potential to be very strong, not really much in the later round. But thank y'all for watching. If y'all would like to see more recap off of previous seasons, please let me know. But with that being said, I am to contain Kunas. Please y'all stay safe. This is Stat7 Sports, and I'll see y'all next time.